Good evening, everyone. I hereby call the City Council Committee meeting for March 1st, 2022 to order. Just brief housekeeping note for everyone who's in attendance this evening, actually two things. As always, we are being live streamed and you will be recorded. We ask that if you are here to make comment or present that you do so at either the table or the podium and begin with your name. And if you're making public comment, street of residence. Second housekeeping note, and thank you all for obliging, the City Hall mask requirement has changed as of today. Per Council President Smith-Waddell, we are continuing to wear them in council chambers as we are gathered here through this meeting. So thank you very much for that. Mr. Harris, if we could do the roll call of members.
Yes, Ms. Baker. Mr. Arroyo.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Colexi.
Here.
Ms. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Diaz.
Here.
And Ms. Walsh.
Here. Thank you. We'll move to the approval of the February 7th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any council comments on the agenda, on the meeting minutes? Any comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Colexi.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh.
Aye. Thank you. Before we move into the committees, I do have one announcement for full council. There are some changes to the agenda this evening that have been brought to our attention. I will list what those are. Under Personnel Committee, we have received a memorandum that Linda Martin has been added as an appointee to the Human Relations Commission Advisory Board. Under the Committee of the Whole, Councilor Diaz has introduced Resolution Number 33, supporting residents of the Ukraine. And under the Finance Committee and of the Committee of the Whole, there are two presentations that are listed on tonight's agenda that members of staff has asked that we push back to next month. And with that, I'll take a motion to make those amendments to tonight's agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second on amending the agenda. Any council comments? Any comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Colexi.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh.
Aye. Thank you very much. And with that, we will open the Personnel Committee. Councilor Calixte.
Yes, thank you, Vice President. And the Personnel Committee has 4 items on its agenda for tonight. The first item is the nomination for appointment of Mrs. Jenna Lee Sanchez as a member of the Human Relations Commission for a term from March 8th, 2022 to September 30th, 2022, replacing Jean Daly, who resigned. Is Mrs. Sanchez here?
I do not see her this evening. No.
All right. So, is there any comments from the other members of the committee?
Councilor Calixte, I would move that we move Janelle Sanchez's appointment to the next council meeting,
Okay.
which is, help me out on the date, I always forget to bring
March
up the
8th.
calendar. March,
8th.
on March 8th.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President. So the next item,
Oh, we need a vote. Need a vote.
Sorry. Second and a vote.
sorry. I'll make a motion for approval to forward the nomination to our next council meeting.
I will second that motion.
Okay.
All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The next item is the nomination for appointment of Mrs. Claudia Galdames as a member of the Public Arts Advisory Board for a term from April 8th, 2022 to July 31st, 2024. Is Mrs. Galdames here?
Not here.
No, she's not here this evening.
Okay, so we will move that nomination to our next council meeting. And may I have a motion for approval?
Motion to move that forward to the council meeting on March 8th.
Second? Okay, the third item on,
And approve.
all in favors?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harris. And the third item of the agenda is the nomination for appointment of Mr. Iber Guerrero Lopez to the Lancaster Industrial Development Authority for a term from April 8th, 2022 to December 31st, 2025.
Councilor Kalik, I would make a motion to move that forward to the meeting on March 8th.
Second? All in favors?
Aye.
Okay.
And Linda.
And the fourth item on the Personnel Committee's agenda for tonight is the nomination for appointment of Mrs. Linda Martin as a member of the Human Relations Commission Advisory Board for a term from March 22 to September 30th, 2025.
Councilor Kalik, I make a motion that we move that to full council on March 8th.
All in favors?
And
Aye.
second.
Oh, second. Okay, all in favors?
Aye.
Okay, so that would be it, Mrs. Vice President, for the Personnel Committee.
Thank you very much, Councilor Kalik.
Thank you.
That moves us to the Finance Committee, which I will be chairing this evening. And we have several items on the agenda this evening, and we'll be discussing a few of them as a group. So the first item on the agenda is Administration Resolution number 19, 20, and 21, which amends the signatories for pension plans, and we'll take those all together with Mr. Hopkins.
Evening, Council. Thanks, Councilor Bakay. So these, as Councilor Bakay mentioned, these three are really all the same thing, but there's one resolution for each of the three defined benefit pension plans that we have, the police, fire, and cash balance pension plan. And really, these resolutions are only needed because of the change in the city controller from Bill Andrews, who retired at the end of, at the very beginning of January of this year, and his office was taken by James Reichenbach, who's now the city controller. So we just have to change the signatories on the Fulton Financial accounts, Fulton Financial Advisor accounts that we have there for those three pension plans.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hopkins. Are there any comments or questions from members of the Finance Committee? Okay.
Nope.
I'll hear a motion on these resolutions together.
Motion to move resolutions 19, 20, and 21 to March 8th council meeting.
Second?
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. We will now be discussing item number 2, item number 3, and actually item number 4 that are all related. Mr. Hopkins, I believe that's still you. Resolutions 22, 23, and 24, appointing a deputy controller, a deputy treasurer, and adopting a tax collection agreement.
Yes, thank you. So these three, as Councilor Bakay indicated, are also, they're not directly connected, but they are all related. Several years ago, when the third-class city code went through a whole bunch of amendments at the state level, one of the items or one of the provisions that was added was the ability of both the elected controller and the elected treasurer to appoint a deputy controller and a deputy treasurer. We've sort of had this in place informally in the past where, for instance, when Bill Andrews was on vacation or otherwise unavailable to approve purchase requisitions that were coming through the system, you're able to approve those electronically, but he was out of town and not able to access that. He would authorize Megan Baum, who's the Treasury Bureau Chief, to approve those on his behalf while he was out of town. So that was sort of an informal arrangement that we had. More recently, and this really relates to the treasurer, we have not had that, we have not really had a formal arrangement in place similar for the treasurer. The Megan Baum is the Treasury Bureau Chief, but it doesn't make sense to have her appointed as both the Deputy Controller and the Deputy Treasurer. So what we did with these resolutions is I talked with James Reichenbach, the Controller. He's in agreement with appointing Von Wynn, you all know is the Deputy Director for Finance. She would be the Deputy Controller if James is unavailable or unable to act in his position as Controller. And then for the Deputy Treasurer, that's where Megan Baum would be appointed as a Deputy Treasurer. And again, I've talked with Vincent Derek Smith, who's the elected Treasurer now, and he's in agreement with that arrangement. So that deals with resolution number 22 and number 23. Number 24 is really formalizing an arrangement that frankly we've had in place for decades, which is that whoever is the Bureau Chief of the Treasury Office, and in this case it's Megan Baum, is really the one who is responsible for the collection, ultimately the collection of property taxes that bills that we issue through the City Treasury Bureau. In my memory here, that goes back into the mid-90s, the Bureau Chief has always been in that position. The actual elected treasurer is not involved in any direct way with the actual collection of real estate taxes. So what this tax collection agreement is really just formalizing that arrangement that again has been in place for quite a few decades. And Megan Baum, when she took the position of Bureau Chief in Treasury, she went through the state tax collection certification process. So she is the certified tax collector for the city. And again, this is just formalizing that arrangement. Assuming that council approves these resolutions at the March 8th meeting, there's a series of documents for both the treasurer and the controller to sign, actually making those deputy treasurer and deputy controller appointments official.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Any questions or comments from the committee on these items
Have any?
or from the rest of council? Okay. In that case, we'll hear a motion for these items together.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Move to council meeting on March 8th.
Thank you for your clarification. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you. All right. The next item on our agenda is resolution number 27, which is the approving of a funding plan project for the Lancaster Higher Education Authority, which is on behalf of Elizabethtown College. And I believe we have folks via Zoom. Is that right, Mr. Harris?
Bringing that up,
Perhaps.
trying to.
If the technology is on our side this evening, we will. And Mr. Hopkins, can you remind us who will be speaking on behalf of this item? Don't have that.
Sure.
in front of me.
Dan Blakinger, who's the solicitor for the Higher Education Authority, and then I believe Tim Horstman, who is the bond counsel for Elizabethtown College, should also be on.
Great, thank you. Look at that. On that screen. There we go.
We have screen.
All right. All right. Is everyone in the Zoom able to hear us here in the meeting? That's okay. Mr. Horstman, we are just kind of making sure that we have our audio all set up correctly here. I want to make sure that everyone who's in the Zoom is able to hear us here in the room. It looks like it might be a little bit tricky.
Yeah, we have a little additional audience tonight.
That's quite all right. All right, so I guess, Mr. Horstman, would you like to kick us off with just a brief explanation, or should that be Mr. Blakinger?
I'll start.
Thank you.
So I'm solicitor for the Lancaster Higher Education Authority, and what's before you is the health and welfare resolution, similar to other resolutions I've brought to you for this authority and several others in the past. This is a project for Elizabethtown College. It was approved by the authority at its meeting on February 21st, I think. And this project is it's a refunding project for funding prior bond issues. Mm-hmm. It also does include some capital improvements on the E-Town campus. What you're being asked to do is what is required by the Municipal Authorities Act, that the municipality that created the authority must approve this as being in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of people in the area of the facilities of the project. So in this case, the area of Elizabethtown College, Lancaster County, whatever you want to think of. So that's required by law, so that's why this is coming to you for this approval. There's really not much more to the approval. We do have bond counsel Tim Horstman, as well as Martha Riley, both from McNeese Wallace, and we have Jerry Silverman from Elizabethtown College on here who can answer other questions you might have about this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blakinger. The one question I have this evening, and we talk about this each time one of these comes up, is that this is allowing, our approval of this would simply allow Elizabethtown College to get the most favorable financing for this project and does not link us in any way to the debt that they would assume. Is that correct?
Correct. What it does for the college is it allows it to, in this case, it's a bond issue, but allows it to get lower interest rates on its debt because it's tax-free to the holders of the debt who will buy them at lower rates because it's tax-free, buy the bonds at lower rates because they're tax-free. So that's what it does for the college. It creates no liability on the authority or certainly the city. The city's not party to the bond issue in any way, so it doesn't create any liability to the city at all.
Terrific. Are there any other comments or questions from the Finance Committee? The rest of council? From the public? Hearing none, I'll hear a motion on this resolution.
Motion to move Resolution 27 to full council on March 8th.
We have a motion and a second, and that is just to clarify on Resolution 27, sorry. I have the wrong one pointed here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and your helper.
Thank you, too.
Have a good evening.
Aw.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that's one person who's still having fun on Zoom. All right. All right, that moves us to the next several items on the agenda for the Finance Committee this evening. We have Administration Resolution 25, authorizing a tax and revenue anticipation note. Resolution 26, declaring an intent to reimburse, which is related to that. And finally, Bill 5, approving a supplemental appropriation for capital projects. Mr. Hopkins, I believe you'll be taking us through each of these items.
Yes, thanks, Councilor Bakay. And I do think while we took the other sets of 3 resolutions as a group. I think we ought to take each one of these individually, and I'm going to guess that our
Well taken.
bond counsel in this would appreciate that also.
Absolutely.
For a variety of reasons. So, these 3 really are a group of legislative items, so they're related, but they're not completely connected. So let me first describe the tax and revenue anticipation note and the reason that we're proceeding with this note. As we discussed at the last meeting, the size of the note is $10 million. The maturity date that has been put out in the RFP that Mr. Peck put out on February 11th was for December 30th of 2022, so the end of 2022. That's the last business day in 2022. The reason that we're pursuing the tax and revenue anticipation note is because we have a short-term need for the funding of capital projects. We're going to use general fund, stormwater fund, and water fund operating dollars for the short-term funding of that capital project. But because we're using those operating fund dollars for capital projects, that creates a cash flow shortfall in each of those 3 funds. So what the tax and revenue anticipation note is actually doing is covering that shortfall. I just emailed a few minutes ago because I didn't catch this on the agenda earlier, but the description of resolution number 25 really should just be authorizing a tax and revenue anticipation note, period. The TRAN is actually not directly funding the capital projects. It is filling a hole created by the funding of capital projects out of those operating funds. The timing of the TRAN, as I said, Mr. Peck's office put the RFP out to over 30 banks on February 11th. The loan proposals are due March 3rd, and the timing on that is my fault because I had it in my head that this meeting was going to be on March 7th, and I gave that date to Daryl, and he ran with that date. So that's my fault. But what we'll do is we'll have those proposals back in. Daryl and I will review those proposals as well, Mr. McCarty, and then we'll come back to City Council at the March 8th meeting and actually present to you the results of the proposals that we got. And as you see in the TRAN resolution itself, there are a number of blanks there for the name of the institution, the interest rate, and things like that, that will be completed and filled in when we have the final results of the bank proposals. So we'll have that at City Council on March 8th. We will have the vote at the March 8th council meeting. The closing preliminarily right now, we have the closing date as March 28th. Which means that we would have at least the first draw of proceeds from the TRAN in the city accounts by the end of March. And that timing allows us to have use our own operating funds then to fund the short-term capital project funding that we need that will lead into these other 2 items that are on the agenda. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions by anybody on City Council on this part of it.
Mr. Hopkins, refresh my memory. The tax and revenue anticipation note is something that historically we've done for various reasons in the past.
Yeah, when we've done them in the past, I think we did TRANs from 2016 through 2019, I believe it was. That was, those were done during what had typically been a cash poor time of the year, basically from, well, for the city itself from December into February and March when we begin to collect real estate tax revenues. The issue with a tax and revenue anticipation note is that it is basically within a calendar year, a fiscal year for the city. So while we had cash poor times in December through February, we would have City Council approve the TRAN in December. The TRAN didn't actually close until the first business day of the new year. Mm-hmm. And we had to make sure that we paid the TRAN back before December 31st of that same year. A TRAN can't be out over a period of years. So in this case, it's a little bit different because what we're doing is we will have a cash shortfall in those 3 funds because we are funding capital projects on a short-term basis until we have a longer-term bond issue in place.
Great. Thank you.
And I'm going to look to Daryl and Mr. McCarty to make sure, Mr. Peck and Mr. McCarty, to make sure that I'm getting each of these items correct. Okay.
Are there any other questions before Mr. Hopkins continues?
Okay, so then I'll go into the description of the resolution number 26. So this is stating a declaration of intent to reimburse. So as you all know, we are planning a larger bond issue later this year, likely coming back to City Council in June. And that would be for permanent financing for the set of capital projects that are attached as Exhibit A to the to the TRAN resolution, and also additional funding for some of those projects and an additional list of projects beyond those that are attached to the TRAN resolution. I'm sorry, not attached to the TRAN resolution. Now they're shaking. Attached to the
Bill, right?
Supplemental Appropriation Ordinance, which is the next item on the agenda. I'm confusing my own self here. So those capital projects, and this is similar to what we've done with Penvest financing, where we have started to use our own operating dollars. And then when we get the Penvest financing, we've done what Penvest calls a letter of no prejudice, basically saying that we can repay ourselves for what we have spent on those capital projects before, in this case, before the bond issue has been done. So what we're doing here is the sizing of this is we anticipate that the final bond issue is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million. So the resolution, this reimbursement resolution, is worded in such a way that we have the authority to spend, to reimburse up to $60 million from those bond proceeds for projects that we undertake prior to the bond issue being completed. The timing of that bond issue, if we bring it to City Council in June, would be City Council action during the month of June. Then there's a 20-day DCED, Department of Community and Economic Development review process that takes an additional 20 days, and then probably another 30 to 40 days for closing. So we wouldn't have bond proceeds in hand until probably mid or end of August. And so this resolution would allow us to reimburse anything that we spent before that time from those bond proceeds.
Ms. Bakay, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one regular meeting scheduled for June
Okay,
and July and August.
okay. We will keep that in mind.
That schedule
Carol
is
and I
always
will add that to our,
too good to
I
be
won't make
true.
another calendar mistake. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from the committee on Resolution 26 from council? And I believe Mr. Hopkins will pause there, and I'll take any comments or questions from the public on either Resolution 25 or 26. In that case, I will hear a motion first for resolution number 25.
Motion to move Resolution 25 to full council on March 8th.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I'll also hear a motion on resolution number 26.
Motion to move Resolution 26, 2022 to full council.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And then, Mr. Hopkins, we'll talk about Bill number 5.
Okay, thank you. So Bill number 5 is needed because while we are moving ahead with the TRAN resolution and the reimbursement resolution, the piece that is missing is actually City Council authority to spend the operating dollars for the projects that we anticipate funding, or that we have a funding need for. So the Supplemental Appropriation Ordinance, if you skip over to the second page of the ordinance, under Section 2 is sort of the meat of the ordinance. And what this is doing, if this were approved by City Council, you would be authorizing the city to spend up to $10 million for the following purposes. The first set of projects is general fund capital projects. Parks and facilities projects would be authorized up to $620,000, and streets and traffic projects would be authorized up to $1 million. So that would be two separate groupings of projects within the general fund. Then in the stormwater management fund, obviously, everything there is related to green infrastructure projects. So that is one set of projects in the grouping of green infrastructure projects for $1,683,990. And then for water fund capital projects, the authorization would be for transmission and distribution projects of up to $2,490,433. And for Conestoga and Susquehanna water treatment plant projects, $4,205,577. And the reason that we established those groupings of projects, you're aware from those of you who have been around for a little while, have seen us come back on a regular basis to make amendments, specific individual project budget amendments. That's been, I think, both from city council stance and also from administration stance, a cumbersome process where we might be moving 50 or 100 or $1,000 from one project to the next because we established the council authorization at the specific project level. What we wanted to do here is establish the council authorization at the project grouping level. The Exhibit A that's attached to the ordinance provides you with the individual projects that would be funded with this authorization. But rather than having to come back to City Council for amendments at the individual project level, what we would have authorization with this ordinance is at that project grouping level. And so if we have one project that, for instance, comes in $50,000 under budget, but another project goes $25,000 over budget, we won't have to come back to City Council for that type of, those are big dollar amounts, but in terms of these capital projects, they're relatively small changes. The financial reporting will be done at the individual project level, but again, the council authorization would be at the project grouping level. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about that difference.
Mr. Hopkins, can you speak to if the groupings of these projects would change at any point, if there was a decision or a need somewhere else? At that point, would they come back to council?
Yes. So for instance, if we had parks and facilities projects, we ended up needing $650,000 instead of $620,000, we would need to come back to City Council for authorization to make that change, because then we're changing the total amount of funds available at that group level. I think of it as sort of like a line item when City Council is approving the operating budgets for the year, you're approving at the line item level. We're not coming back to you if an office supply budget needs to, the individual items in an office supply budget need to be changed a little bit. So that's sort of the analogy to this situation here.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? From the rest of council? From the public? All right, and in that case, I'll hear a motion on bill number 5.
Motion to move bill number 5 to full council on March 8th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe that concludes the Finance Committee for this evening. That takes us into Community Planning. Counselor Craig.
Thank you, Madam Vice. We have 6 items on the agenda. First of that being a review of the Historical Commission recommendations for 43 through 49 West King Street. And is there somebody here that can speak to that? Hello.
Hi, I'm Stephen Funk, Vice Chair of the Historical Commission. I don't know how much you know about the project. It wasn't
Yeah,
particularly...
I realize that there are some stipulations.
Pardon?
Said I realize that there are some stipulations that I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can briefly kind of describe the project. The project came before the commission 3 times. One at the, what's the word? Conceptual level, thank you. And then twice for a formal review. At the conceptual level, the applicants did propose, there was one controversial portion of the project, which was the demolition of the Red Wing building, which is the 1-story mid-century modern former gas station on the property. The project as a whole was received positively by the commission. The commission was in favor of the project. We did have a concern about the loss of that building in the original proposal. So we asked them in their formal application to look at the possibility of saving that building. They came before the commission again, and again, their proposal included demolition of the Red Wing building. And their reasoning was that it wasn't technically feasible or economically feasible to save the building. But the applicant failed to provide any backup information, any budgets, any designs to support that position. So at that meeting, we tabled the application and asked them to come back with options and with backup information showing that the project didn't work with that building being left in place. So finally, the last meeting, which was held last week, they came back and they did provide quite a bit of supporting documentation with multiple options, including leaving the building on site and reducing the overall size or overall footprint of their new construction. Again, also leaving the building in sight and shifting the entire building to the east, adding a floor, and then also relocating the building, the Red Wing building, on the site in a different location, and also deconstructing a building and salvaging a portion of it and basically putting it on display. And then they had budget figures for all of those options, showing the increased costs and or the loss in revenue of each. And it was agreed at that time that it was really wasn't feasible to keep the building on the site, but that the commission still felt that the building was worth preserving. So the condition of our recommendation to approve demolition was that they carefully disassemble the building, salvage the metal panels, which are the character-defining features of the building, and store them for future reassembly off-site. And they agreed to that stipulation. So the vote was unanimous to approve, to recommend approval of the project.
Thank you. Was there any specific time frame that they were given to erect this building on a different site?
No. And there really wasn't, there was a caveat in the recommendation that if they determined at some point that they can't salvage it for whatever reason, that they would have to come back to the commission for review again, and to present their reasoning for why it can't be preserved. The thinking was that given the kind of the process of land development and all of the and zoning and all the other approvals that a project like this has to go through, it would be at least a year before they would even contemplate demolition, and that the stipulation was that before they do demolish the building, and they decide that they can't save it, that they would come back for another review.
Okay, so
but there was no time limit put on it.
okay, but in other words, before they start construction, they still have to come back before HARB?
No, if they agree to the conditions, was that they disassemble the building and store the pieces in and I think the wording was a safe, secure warehouse. that they could demolish it, and that they were, the obligation was to save the pieces of the building.
Okay.
But there was no time limit, and there was really no guarantee that a third party would actually reassemble the building somewhere. The applicants made the promise that they would, try to find someone who would take the building, but there was no requirement that the building be reassembled off-site.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee?
If I may, Councilor Craig? Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Funk. In what scenario would another buyer use those pieces? Is it to reconstruct a new building, a new development? What would be a scenario where those pieces would actually be
Yeah,
used?
the thought was, it's a fairly small building, so it could conceivably be picked up and moved. But given the condition of the building, it's just a wood frame building with a basement. It would be prohibitively expensive to pick it up and move it someplace. And given that the only historic fabric that's left in the building is really the skin, the exterior skin, that it was important to save that, and that the rest of the building really could be demolished. But the hope is that it would be reassembled in its original form on another site.
Thank you.
So, and it's a small building. I don't know what the square footage is, but it's 900 square feet. Yeah. So it's an appropriate size for a small cafe or something, but, or small retail.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Counselor. I can see the facet of it. So you're basically saying you're trying to keep that portion because it is a small building. I can see it. So they basically want to erect it and take it somewhere else? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay. And can you give me, I didn't really look at how old it is, but do you know more or less the age?
Early 1940s.
1940s, okay.
And, the reason that the commission and the public are concerned about it, I should say, there were no public comments at the meeting. There was some chatter on Facebook about it, but no one actually showed up to the meeting to voice any concern about the building. But what makes the building important is it's really the last building of its type in the city. There are no more, little one-story, mid-century gas stations.
It is a unique building.
It is.
And I recall it
Yeah.
back in the 80s when I came here, so it's a very
Yeah.
unique structure, I would say.
The interesting thing about it, though, is most of the comments on Facebook about it were like, "Where's this building?" I don't know what you're talking about. So it's one of those buildings that, if you can stop and take a look at it, it's beautiful. It's a great example of, mid-century. It's kind of a transition, like Art Moderne, Art Deco, mid-century modern design. But it's very easy to just drive right past it and not notice it.
Yeah, I think preserving it would be, important for our community, especially how old it is and how unique it is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the committee? Any questions from council as a whole? Any questions from the public? Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Harris, we don't need to vote on a review, do we?
No, it'll automatically get to the agenda.
Thank you.
You can make a motion if you'd like. It'll automatically.
No, we'll talk about this again on Tuesday. The next item on the agenda the next several items on the agenda are resolutions, Administration Resolution 28, authorizing application for the local shares account program. And there's several different, should we do these separately?
Counselor Craig, I think we could take these together unless there's any reason why we shouldn't. But
Okay.
it is your committee, so.
Okay, thank you. Well, then it'll be Resolution 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32, authorizing applications for the local shares account program. And it'll be by tenfold, the Spanish American Civic Association, the YWCA, South End's Concerned Neighbors, and the City of Lancaster. And I believe Jess is here to give us a little more information.
Good evening, Council. I'm here with you tonight because as of 3 weeks ago, with the hire of Tina Campbell as the city's fund development manager, we've moved the development function for the city out of administrative services and into the mayor's office. So we're sponsoring this work on behalf of organizations in the city that came to us requesting applications for this new source of funding. So these are, this is gaming funds coming from the state. There's 140 million statewide that's available. This is the first time that it's being opened to Lancaster County. So we just learned about it very late. It opened late January, and the deadline to submit is in mid-March, and we need a resolution. The only organizations that can apply for these funds are local units of government. So these organizations came to us and asked the city to apply. I could go into detail if it would be helpful for you to know what the uses are, but in general, they have to be used for capital projects, not operating projects, and they need to be nonprofit in nature. So in each of these cases, it's essentially a capital project from one of these organizations, and I believe your council is well aware of each of these organizations. They're organizations that we've worked with before, have either done projects like this before, passed through grants, or funded directly. In the city's case, we can also apply for a city capital project, and we would be applying for capital funds to support the renovation and upgrades of Binns Park.
Thank you. I see this as a good thing, and we're just helping nonprofits apply for, and they're going to do the paperwork. And I think I read that the city will be assisting them in their paperwork, but there is reimbursement for city staff's time.
Our plan is that they really need to do the legwork for the application piece. We'll submit it. We have to submit it through the city. If awarded, that's really where we would do the administrative heavy lifting for the duration of the grant. We would need to do the compliance, the reporting, and the grant would essentially flow through the city. So in that case, we're allowed to request 2% of the total grant award as a reimbursement for those costs, which we anticipate, would work for us.
Great. Are there any questions from the committee? Who else is on the committee? Okay, colleagues. Any questions from the rest of council?
Counselor Craig.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Ms. King, thank you so much. Just because this is the first time that Lancaster County organizations have been eligible to apply, I'm not sure how long this has been in place, but do you have a sense of how many organizations across the state apply for these dollars? 140 million sounds like a lot, but also not a whole lot.
I don't have numbers of organizations. Our sense in talking to, it comes through the Department of Community Economic Development from the state, and they anticipate this is going to be very competitive across the state. And so we don't know exactly. We do anticipate this will be open on an annual basis, and we want to use this first year to kind of learn how it goes, see what's awarded, and then set up more of a process going forward.
Great. That answered actually a couple of my questions then. Thank you.
Great.
Good.
Councilor Craig?
Go ahead.
In regards to the amounts, is it a possibility that they get maybe some portion, whether it's a 5% portion, a 50% portion? I guess it would depend on what they decide. Is that correct?
That's a great question. I am not sure on the details. I know what they're asking based on and that's, they've given us those amounts. I don't know if DCED would award a partial amount, but if that's, I could get an answer for that and get it to you if it'd be helpful.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Councilor Craig, that actually reminds me of one other question I have. Who sets the criteria and actually makes the decision on awarding these at the state level?
My understanding is it's through DCED.
Okay, so
Department of
within that department.
Economic Development.
Great, thank you.
And it goes through a single application for assistance and kind of how you do most state funding.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any questions from the public?
Tim Stolder, One United Lancaster. Is any money allocated specifically to, on a county or regional basis, or will the organizations be competing statewide?
My understanding is this is statewide.
Are there any further questions from the public? Great. Hearing none, I'll hear a motion to move resolution 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32
So moved.
to full council on March 8th. All those in favor? Aye.
Second.
Oops. Second. Now, all those in favor?
Aye.
Madam Vice, I believe that is the conclusion of community planning.
Thank you very much, Councilor Craig. That moves us to the Economic Development Committee. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Vice President Bakay. Just a quick update regarding the ARPA RFP. The review team is currently in the process of reviewing the submitted requests for proposals. Next steps include scheduling interviews with the top candidates prior to selection, and that should be happening very soon. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Appreciate the update. That then takes us to the Committee of the Whole this evening. We will have actually 3 items on the agenda. We'll begin with resolution number 33, which was introduced by Councilor Diaz, and I think all members of council have received a copy of that, and that is in support of the people of Ukraine. Councilor Diaz?
Yes. The reason why I felt that we needed to bring this forward. Okay.
Hey, there we go. There we go.
The reason why I brought this resolution forward was because I feel that the invasion of Kuwait, Ukraine has been very devastating, and we need to denounce this immoral progression. And, watching it on TV, listening to the news is very devastating. It's not only Ukraine, but also some of the lack of resources that Russia's residents also will have. And they're already suffering as it is with food resources and rations. So it goes both ways. But we definitely need to fight against any type of military against Ukraine and stand, in solidarity.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. Are there any council comments on the resolution? I will make note that the local Ukrainian Catholic Church has been invited to join us at our next council meeting, just in anticipation of this being moved to that agenda. And are there any comments from the public on this resolution? Hearing none, I'll hear a motion.
Motion to move resolution 33 to full council on March 8th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We have resolution number 17, recognizing Women's History Month, and I was pleased to bring that resolution forward. There are lots of reasons that we ought to celebrate March as Women's History Month here in the city and across the nation. For one such reason that I will point out is that what we believe is the first time in the city's history, although we're working on validating that, but I think that it's probably true, the city council is majority women, and that should be celebrated. Yes. And so for that reason and so many others, and of course we have Mayor Srirachi as well, leading the city, Jess King, Chief of Staff, so many amazing women that do work here in the city and at our community organizations, and they're leading the way in terms of our neighborhood groups and bringing people together and leading the way during the pandemic especially. It is important that we recognize this month. I will take any other council comments on this resolution. Or from the public. Hearing none, I'll hear a motion on this one.
Motion to move the full council on March 8th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, all of you. And lastly, we have resolution number 18 in front of us. That is supporting the Patient Safety Act. And this was introduced by actually Council President Smith Waddell. And I am just bringing up my materials here for that one. Resolution 18. So he asked that I just briefly speak to that this evening. This is a resolution that would support House Bill 106 and Senate Bill 240, which is the Patient Safety Act, and calling on our legislators in Harrisburg to protect patients and support frontline healthcare workers, which we know is very important in this time, who are looking to increase the safety of patients by having safe ratios of patients to staff. Are there any other comments on this resolution? From the public? Hearing none, I'll take a motion on resolution 18.
I motion to move the full council on March 8th.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And that will bring us to our clerk's report. Mr. Harris, if you would not mind.
I'd be happy to, Madam Vice President.
Thank you.
So some of the things I've done in the past month. We had the appointment of a new council member, and following the appointment of Katie Walsh, requested internet and email accounts for her, worked with IT to prepare a computer tablet for her use, ordered and supplied her with council business cards and electronic key card, ordered and received a nameplate for the council dais, ordered an updated council stationery, updated sharing permissions for shared files, provided city Human Resources with their contact information and documents, performed her swearing in, and met with her twice for council orientation. I also registered Councilors Walsh and Kalesi for the Pennsylvania Municipal League new officials training. I retrieved the 2021 yearbook from the binder, and that it's now on the shelf in a dark room where it will where it is a record of our accomplishments of the last year. Mm-hmm. Statement of financial interest, I continue to request and receive statements of financial interest from city officials and from city staff and boards, commissions, and authority members from last year. That'll be ongoing through May 1st, which is a deadline for that. Writing and research. So I wrote the Patient Care Act resolution, which you just reviewed. and worked with Councilor Bakay on the Women's History Month resolution, wrote the Ukrainian resolution, and amended a resolution, a 2019 resolution, which that you passed on February 22nd. I attended the Parking Authority meeting and provided you a summary of that discussion. I provided councilors and staff with an updated list of boards, commissions, and authority vacancies, notarized documents on behalf of city staff, attested a document for a French pension for a city resident. I fielded an email from a Lancaster, California resident and a phone call from a Lancaster, Ohio resident on the same day, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow.
And added other events to the city's electronic calendar for the council chambers on behalf of city staff.
Mr. Harris, I give you my heartfelt thanks, and I know that there's so many other things that are not on that clerk's report that you do every day. So thank you very much for all that you do, and thank you for your report this evening.
Thank you.
Councilors, with that, our agenda is, we have concluded our agenda. I will hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.